Welcome to episode number 189 of the Life Changing Questions podcast. Today, we have a bit of a writing legend joining us. His name is John David Mann, and he's an award-winning author whose books have sold more than 3 million copies in 36 languages, including the New York Times best-selling memoir, The Red Circle, with former Navy SEAL Brandon Webb, and the New York Times best-selling parable, The Latte Factor, with personal finance legend David Bach. As a teenager, John started his own high school and was an award-winning composer and cellist before turning to careers as an entrepreneur and author. His classic book, The Go-Giver, with Bob Berg, who we interviewed back in episode 17, won the Living Now Book Awards Evergreen Medal for its contribution to positive global change. I'm very excited to have John here with us today because his latest leadership parable, The Vagrant, comes out on September 19th. I've read it. It's an amazing book, and I really look forward to getting into it with John today. So John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's delightful to be here.
John, in your bio there was a little bit of something I didn't know about you. You are an award-winning composer and cellist, but you changed your career to go into entrepreneurship and writing. I wonder if you could tell us about that journey. Not everyone becomes an award-winning composer and an award-winning author.
Yeah, I was born into a musical family. My father was a choral conductor and musicologist. My mother was a playwright who wrote plays for children. In the course of that, she often had her sons, my older brother and I, write incidental music for the plays. So I grew up with classical music all around me, and it was my first career. I've kind of career hopped throughout my life. I was 13 years old when I won that International Music Award. I was composing actively then and playing the cello. I was not a prodigy. I was just really curious and really interested and really eager to learn. And I did jump through, as I say, a number of careers. I went from composition and cello to nutrition and natural health. And that led me to sales and direct sales. And I got into entrepreneurship. I started a high school when I was a teenager. And then I got involved with Bucky Fuller's people, his futuristic design. And I ended up writing. Everywhere I went, I ended up being the guy who was doing the newsletter or the interview or whatever. And I finally kind of discovered that what I'd been angling for the entire time, like a pinball machine getting toward the bottom of the game, the slot at the bottom for me was writing. So this is now what I am. I'm a writer. I write books.
I love that. What a great metaphor as well, it being that pinball. I recognize there's some people who are that pinball in the machine and they're getting banged around everywhere and they haven't quite made it to the point where you have. Amazing that you had such success along the way. And you mentioned Bucky Fuller there. I don't suppose everyone listening would be familiar with Buckminster Fuller, but I'm certainly familiar with him through the work of Marshall Thurber as well. So I'm not sure if that's someone that you've met along the way.
Right. Marshall Thurber. I remember writing about Fuller as a result of talking to Marshall. Yes. Fuller was a huge influence on me early on in my teens.
Tell me a little bit about your experience there and his influence, because I know he's also a very remarkable guy.
Remarkable. He was, in fact. I heard him speak live. I attended a very small, interesting kind of school devoted, kind of focused on the arts, a quirky kind of school in my grade school years. And the director had Fuller come and give us a talk in our town. And so when I think I was 16 or maybe 17, I heard him speak and he blew my mind. It was just fascinating to me. And I went out and read everything I could get my hands on. And then later, when I became a composer, I composed a massive piece of music to his words, setting his words to music, his version of the Lord's Prayer from No More Secondhand God. And I had it all arranged where I was going to have a premiere of the piece in Philadelphia where he was teaching, and he was going to come to the premiere, and but it all fell apart. There were logistic difficulties and a Teamster strike, and the thing got postponed, and then Mr. Fuller died. But as I say, he was an enormous influence in my life, largely because of his positivity. His extraordinarily optimistic, positive view about what's possible to do with creative thinking, innovative thinking. And I've always really appreciated that spirit.
I love that. I never knew that you composed something about that. How very incredible. And it's good to hear this energy of optimism and positivity. And actually, I feel it coming through the conversation right now. Tell us then about the writing. You sound like you say you landed up always being the person who gravitates to that, the newsletters for these organizations you're involved with. What got you to write your first book and get to the stage of becoming a New York Times bestselling author?
Yeah, I came into it kind of backwards, or not backwards, but I backed into it. It wasn't an intention like I am going to become a writer. I never thought that. Um, I spent many years as an editor because I founded or helped found a series of business journals. And in each one, I did all the editorial work. I was always the guy who took the articles that came in that had good ideas, but terrible writing or sloppy writing or whatever, and making them fit for publication. So I crafted the editorial side of things for probably 2 decades. And through that, I began helping people write their book. I would edit someone's book. I kind of half ghost wrote their book. I ended up ghostwriting, and that turned into co-authoring, collaborating with people like Bob Berg, Daniel Burrus. You mentioned John Assaraf, David Bach, the Latte Factor guy. And I, in the course of doing those early books, I realized, hey, I love this. This is what I love to do. And so now, I became a full-fledged author, and I'm working on my first solo novel right now. I have my book, of course, How to Write Good, which is just my book. But most of my books have been collaborations with others, which kind of still betrays those editorial roots.
That makes a lot of sense, because I was wondering from that perspective. I mean, these are well-known people in the industry, and I don't know if they're well-known now because of the books that you've helped them write or because of the work that they've done as well. What you think of John Assaraf? I know he was from The Secret, and Bob Berg, who we spoke to in episode 17. Tell me about that. Do they come to you with their ideas and their principles, and then you help them create the book? What's the collaboration process there?
It varies from collaborator to collaborator. In some cases, The Go-Giver is a great example, because The Go-Giver is probably my best known book. And people identify that with Bob Berg because Bob is out and he speaks about it, and he's very public. Whereas I joke that Bob keeps me at home chained to a post in the basement with a typewriter. I tend to be solitary at home working. But The Go-Giver is really a collaboration of fundamental ideas that Bob had in his book, Endless Referrals, which is very popular, and ideas that I'd had in my sales and leadership business, which I'd had for many years. And so it was really a meeting of minds. The 5 laws of stratospheric success, which the book is based on, didn't exist in our minds until I set pen to paper and we started actually banging out the manuscript. And it evolved in the course of working. This happens in a lot of cases. For example, Daniel Burrus, the futurist. I wrote Flash Foresight with Dan. Dan's a brilliant man, an incredible speaker. He had all these incredible ideas, but he didn't have 7 principles. The book's based on 7 principles. He didn't have 7. He had 70. He had like 1 million principles. Dan is like fire hose. And so part of the task with Dan was to spend a year with him extracting what I felt were 7 key principles of his. So oftentimes I'm working with somebody else's ideas, but I'm also playing with them, consolidating them, articulating them, bringing in some of my own. It's a very creative process. Then you get to the thrillers, which are totally a collaboration. I mean, my Brandon Webb, my Navy SEAL sniper partner, he has some plot ideas and some military-based background ideas, but then I bring in characters and plots and everything, and so it's a complete collaboration. So yeah, it has been an interesting evolution of this collaboration process.
I love it. It's so great that when you work with someone else, something potentially new or different comes out of that, and it's bringing the best of your experience and their experience, and then something amazing happens. And clearly it works for you to sell as many books as you have in so many different languages. There's clearly a recipe here that's working. I've got so many angles I want to go with this, but let's stick on the concept of writing a little bit more, because you co-author and collaborate with people, but of course there are other people who would love to just write their own thing. And given your experience and ability with that, do you or can you help people to improve their own writing ability?
Yeah, I am a Jedi Knight, a champion for people's books to be better. With the explosion of self-publishing in the last 2 decades, it's become extraordinarily easy to write and publish a book. Unfortunately, and that's good. Unfortunately, it's also become extraordinarily easy to publish a terrible book. And so you see so many people who have an idea, fiction or nonfiction, who put out a book, and the book is just so far short of what it should be. The great majority of books I see coming out these days are just really, they're nowhere near their potential. As a consequence, they don't have the impact they should. They're like somebody getting up to give a public talk and they're wearing a ripped t-shirt, and they haven't really got their talk planned. So they're going, stammering. It may be a great idea, but it isn't ready for prime time. So I have a writers and aspiring authors coaching program where I help people to take an idea all the way through the process of articulating it, drafting it, outlining it, polishing it, improving it, refining it, making it excellent, elevating it, and launching it into the world so that they actually get readers, so it has an impact. And it's funny, people often don't realize that just getting a book published, even with a big publisher like HarperCollins or Penguin Random House or somebody, doesn't mean anybody's going to buy it. Doesn't mean it's going to make a difference in the world, because publishers don't really market books. They just make them available. So yeah, that's really a mission of mine, is to help people who want to write a book, help them do it right and launch it in the world.
The metaphor there really sticks in my brain. You don't want to be that person on stage stammering and stuttering because you haven't thought it all through. You want to have something that's
right.
Very well articulated.
Deliver it, man. You want to deliver it. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned there, of course, it's not about just writing the book and then the publishers are going to get it out there. You even with your reputation, your experience, that you've already had, multiple best-selling books, you still work very hard after you've written the book to get out there and talk and speak to people and let people know about it. So now you've just come off the back of a pretty big tour in doing that for your novel.
Yes. Yeah, I have this thriller series. It's now 3 books. It's a trilogy so far: Steel Fear, Cold Fear, Blind Fear. And I like to say Steel Fear is secretly a leadership parable disguised as a crime novel. And Cold Fear was a friendship parable disguised as a crime novel. And this one is a family and childhood parable disguised as a crime novel. Anyway, they're extraordinarily fun to write. And I just came back from a tour literally all around the US. Because it is true, publishing a book doesn't get it in people's minds. The world is so busy and it's so noisy out there that to actually get your message out, it takes an extraordinary amount of concentrated, clear effort.
Wow. So your time is split between writing and letting people know about your amazing books, and of course now helping others write good quality books. So we're improving the quality that's out there on Amazon. And I must admit, there have been times when I brought books and they're really very flimsy marketing pamphlets. It's very disappointing. And I guess I know when I pick up a book like yours and when I read it, there's a lot of quality in there. I've been very fortunate, and I want to say thank you. I've had the privilege of reading your forthcoming book, which is coming out this week. And I'm just going to pop it up on the screen there. Oops, I said I'd pop up on the screen there if I have
pop
a copy
up here.
Of it. Oh, there you got it. There you go. You got it there. Yeah. Perfect. I was trying to do the same thing here.
There it is. I love
there you go. And
I really, director showed us that bird. I fell in love with that bird. That bird is in the story, actually. Go ahead.
That bird is in the story, and a very important part of the story and the whole metaphor there. I really enjoyed it. I found it to be a very powerful book, and it is a parable, and as you say, it is about a journey of leadership. A lot of direction in there, or prompts for self-awareness and improving your self-awareness as a leader. So I really got a lot of value out of it. But I wonder if you could maybe tell us about your inspiration for this book, and if people are going to pick it up this week, what they're going to get out of it.
It's a funny thing, because first of all, leadership has always fascinated me. It's always been the topic that more than any other topic has captured my attention. My father, as I said, was a choral conductor, and I've seen him, work with 100 people, 200 people, and they all are just like under his spell. And he was not the kind of leader who shouted or used power, or he was the opposite. He was such a servant leader, but everybody who came into contact with him wanted to do their best job for him. It's just how he was. I was fascinated by this. And so leadership has always intrigued me. I have thought for years, I had 2 ideas for a parable. I thought I'd love to write a book about forgiveness, and I'd love to write a parable about humility. Humility fascinates me. We talk about it a bunch in several of the Go-Giver books, particularly the Go-Giver Leader. And one day, Dan Rockwell, creator of the Leadership Freak blog, one of those popular leadership blogs in the world, called me up and said, I knew him by reputation, but we didn't really know each other. We'd never spoken. He called me up and said, I want to write a parable, but I don't really know how to, I know I can't do that, but I wonder if you'd be interested in collaborating with me to write a parable about humility. And I went ding, 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 ding. I said, tell me more. So Dan had this idea. He had an idea for a basic premise, sort of a story setup. And it's a story that becomes a little bit like the book of Job from the Old Testament. It's an up-and-coming young leader, very promising, bright executive, very accomplished, who gradually, not too gradually, in the story kind of loses everything. Misfortunes befall him from right and left and above and below. It's just horrifying. And the moment I heard his setup, he said, here's what the first minute would look like. I was like, I fell in love with it. I got to do it. And so I sat down. It's just like with the Go-Giver. I sat down with the premise and this initial character, which is this guy, Bob, and this homeless man that he meets on page 1. And I was off to the races. I worked on that for a short while, always collaborating with Dan, bopping ideas off him in email. And it's different than anything I've ever written. We don't want to give away spoilers. It's got a kind of almost supernatural, some kind of a surprising, almost science fiction-y twist to it. And it's almost more of a novella or a novel than a little novel than a parable. But it's definitely a parable about personal development and self-reflection, which I think is the most important facet for any reader. Any leader to look at.
It does have a very powerful twist, and it keeps you hooked and engaged from the very beginning. And then as you see this twist and it unveils, like the light bulb goes off and all the lessons kind of come home to roost all in one go. So it's superbly done. It was one of those books I was able to sit there and complete it all in one go, which that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you need to put things down and come back to them. So it was very, very engaging and very valuable to read. And I think the lessons in there, you said really the heart of this for you was around humility. Well, tell me a little bit more about that humility. What's maybe like an important message that we can share there today without giving away any spoilers from the book? Because you really should, if you haven't had a chance to go and buy yourself a copy, I would suggest you do.
There's a line somewhere in the middle of the book. Actually, it's kind of toward the latter end of the book. Bob, our hero in the book, is leafing through a Bible that he happens to have picked up, and he sees an inscription somebody scribbled in there, and it says, humility is when you get your ego in perspective. Humiliation is when you don't, and the world has to do it for you. And sort of the whole theme of the book is what happens to us when we don't ask ourselves the right questions, when we don't look in the mirror. In fact, it's really a book about looking in the mirror. There's even a pivotal scene, a whole chapter that takes place in front of a mirror in a men's room. And so it is a book about self-reflection. It is a book about getting perspective on yourself, and the consequences of what happens when you don't. Bob loses everything in his life, and you come to see that a lot of that stems out of so that's kind of the set.
The internet just dropped there. You were mid sentence. It said is what comes out. You said what happens when we don't ask ourselves the right questions, and you were speaking about Bob, and it froze. So maybe if you pick up from there, we'll clip this back.
It's what happens when we don't ask ourselves questions and take an honest look at ourselves and our own behavior. We don't self-reflect. I was saying a lot of the book is kind of about looking in the mirror. There's even an entire chapter which takes place in front of a mirror, literally a mirror, where Bob is screaming into the mirror, "What do you want from me?" And it is a book about the consequences of not looking in the mirror, the consequences of not taking honest stock of ourselves, of not looking at ourselves from another perspective. And that's the journey that Bob is on. A lot of it comes from that beautiful scene in Shawshank Redemption when Morgan Freeman, in his final parole hearing, he talks about how he wishes he could talk to that young, stupid kid who committed that terrible crime and what he would say to himself. And how many of us have asked that question? What would I say to myself if I could talk to my 19-year-old self or my 20-year-old self? That's kind of the premise of the book. It's like, maybe we can ask those questions now rather than waiting 40 years or 20 years or even 5 years in the future.
I love that. And if we ask ourselves the right questions, of course, we could have a very different outcome. In Morgan Freeman's case in that movie, he might not have spent his whole life in prison. He might have done something very different. Now, it may not be so severe for us in terms of a decision around doing something that makes us go to prison or not, but asking the right question at the right time can certainly change your life and put your life on a very different path and a different trajectory. We say on here that the quality of the questions we ask ourselves impact the quality of our lives. With that being true, John, I wonder, what's one question you've asked that's had the biggest positive impact on your life or maybe even the life of the clients that you serve?
Man, I would love to talk with you about this for another half hour, because when I was young,
I'm here if you want to be. I will stay here.
When I was young, when I was in my 20s, or anyway, 30 or so, I wrote an article. I was encountering a lot of people's work with affirmations. And I wrote an article that basically said, I have a hard time with affirmations because I tell myself how handsome I am and how successful I am and how wealthy I am and how amazing I am. And I don't believe it. It's like part of me is saying, are we going to be tested on this? And what I found was it doesn't work for me to affirm things to myself. But when I ask myself questions, powerful questions, that draws me in all kinds of directions. So the name of the article was In Praise of Questformations. And so I love the theme of your podcast, because I've kind of guided my entire life about that. One of the things I teach in my coaching program in writing is to let your writing be led by questions. What's really going on in this? What do I really want people to know? What do I really want to have happen in this chapter? The questions are so much more powerful than answers. I once heard a speaker on the radio, I don't even know his name, say that answers are for people who can't learn how to be comfortable living with questions. And I love that. Answers can be okay, but they often shortcut the possibilities of discovery. So one question I've trained myself to ask, and I teach this, is in difficult situations, in painful circumstances, and I've been through tragedies and very painful circumstances, as probably all of us have. In the midst of difficult situations, large and small, I train myself to ask myself, what is the opportunity here? What is the opportunity for my life? What is the opportunity for a new direction? What is the opportunity for me to become a larger version of myself? The word opportunity comes from a phrase in Latin meaning we're at the port, ob port. It means it describes a ship that has arrived at a port, perhaps in a storm. A port is a kind of door, why we call doors portals. So that's really what an opportunity is. You stand literally in front of a door. We just often don't recognize that that's what it is, because it feels like a slammed door in our face, like a brick wall. So what is the opportunity? What is the door that is waiting for me to open it here? Hey, it's kind of the question that Bob is being asked in the Vagrant throughout the pages of that book. I've learned to ask myself that question, even like if I hit my thumb with a hammer, I'll go, what is the opportunity here? Because there's always, and I hit myself with metaphorical hammers all the time, right? We're causing all kinds of thumb pain in our lives. There are always doorways waiting to be opened.
There are always doorways waiting to be opened. And my experience with DIY, you hit yourself with a hammer. I've dropped things and broken my finger. And I think the opportunity here is to pass that on to someone else to do that work for me.
That's one great door. The door of delegation and honesty.
It's a really great door. It's so powerful then. So if you're listening right now and you are stuck in a difficult situation or you've had some challenges, ask yourself that question. What is the opportunity here to become a larger version of myself? What is the other ports or doorways that are open and available for me? I've shared this one myself, John, with the listeners on the show before. I had a situation very similar to that, and the question was very similar. I was stuck and everything had gone wrong in my life. The relationship had fallen apart. The career was, I was being made redundant. Someone ran into the back of my car, and because of all of this, I wasn't necessarily going to be able to keep my house, and I didn't really feel like I had anything going for me. And I think my question probably was phrased slightly differently to yours, but it was about the same thing. What is the other option here? I can continue going down this track, and that's going to lead to one place. But if I make a different decision right now, what else is open for me? And I think when I asked that question, I realized that it doesn't have to stay stuck here. I have all this other possibility. And what is that possibility? Well, of course, then you could be excited about what's different from this, what can come out of this, what's the new port that I can arrive in. So I really relate to that question. It's super powerful.
Can I bounce off that for 1 second?
Please, please.
I had a writing teacher once, one of my best teachers ever, who taught a master class in advanced screenwriting. I was studying screenwriting at the time. That was my plan, to become a screenwriter. One of those plans that didn't work out because the universe had a better idea for me. But he taught us. One technique he taught us was when you're stuck on a line. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's very true. When you're stuck on a line, you're in a scene and this line isn't working. Rather than ask yourself, what is the best line here? Or what is the right line here? Ask yourself, what are 7 ways I could do this? And he would have us literally as an assignment come in a certain line of dialogue in a certain situation, a scene, and write out 7 different ways that the character could talk at that point, all of which had to be viable, all of which had to be strong. And developing the habit of finding 7 possibilities rather than looking for the right one freed us from this concept that there is one right answer, because there isn't one right answer. There's lots of great answers, because our lives are constantly, shooting off in directions and many, many possibilities. Doors and windows are constantly closing. And we have to be able to say, okay, I'll turn this way and make it even better. Oh, go that way, make it even better. That expression, this, when you get rejected in something, this or something better. Yeah. That's another mantra that my wife and I have trained ourselves to speak. When we have a huge setback in business or something, it's always this or something better. So I am grateful to my teacher for the look for 7 answers trick.
It is a really great trick. What are 7 ways I can do this? There's not one right answer. And I guess we can get stuck on that. This one thing we've been pushing so hard for. And like you say, maybe that's not the direction for us. Maybe that's an opportunity for our pinball to drop a little bit further down to find the right slot where we really need to be. So this or something better. And that leaves you open to the fact that there could be many more amazing things out there. Now, the interesting thing, let's loop back to your in praise of quest formation. So basically what you're saying is the brain is more open, rather than you kind of affirming these things and telling yourself the brain, you're open when you ask the question. We had another New York Times bestselling author share a very similar point, Daniel H. Pink. And he asked the question, he used a great example on it because he was saying that like Bob the Builder wouldn't say, I can fix it. Bob the Builder, can you fix it? Bob the Builder, yes, I can. Right. So he was using that as an example. If we ask ourselves a question, then we go internally and we realize, well, yes, we can do that. I think in a slightly different way with this, I guess we had so many questions on here. One of the thoughts I had, you spoke about affirmations or incantations. Incantations are kind of affirmations whilst you move. I came up with the idea of like an incant question. So you rather than saying, I am a leader, I am a leader, I am a leader, you would be saying, how can I be a better leader, or how am I a better leader now? And
what would a great leader do right now?
Help slot it in there, because then your brain is looking for the answers how you can be or how you are. So I really love that angle and that perception.
Yes, yeah. Daniel H. Pink. You mean this Daniel H. Pink?
The one who is written all over the top of your book. Your good friend who said how amazing you are.
He's brilliant. He's so great. He was so generous to do this. Yeah, it is. It opens your brain up to possibilities. And they're possibilities that you very likely would never see if you jumped on the answer that you had in your mind. I love it. That's great. An in-can question.
I love everything that's happening in this conversation. You said you could speak for another half hour on this topic of questions, and I would love to pick your brain on that. But of course, I know we've got to get you off to the rest of your day, so we've got to get you going. If you're listening, there's some very powerful questions here then. So you definitely want to be asking yourself, in any challenging situation, what is the opportunity to become a larger version of myself here? What other opportunities are open for me? And ask yourself that question, rather than there being one right answer. What are 7 ways I can do this? What are 7 different options that I can have? Go to wherever you're listening to the show notes, click in there. There's a clickable link for the book, The Vagrant. You'll be able to get hold of that. It's coming out on the 19th of September. So you can get in yourself and pre-order and see that there. And of course, if you would like to improve your writing skills and writing ability, then you can check out howtowritegood.com. And that's also in the show notes. You can click on it there. John, do you have any final messages you'd like to share, or anything else that you'd like to let the audience know?
I just think that, we have been trained in so many ways, so many times in the philosophy of believing in ourselves, in the philosophy of following our own, the beat of our own drummer, following our own path. And there is great value in that, and there's great wisdom in that. But I also think that there is equal value and equal wisdom, complementary value and complementary wisdom, to also acknowledging that nobody in the world knows us better than ourselves, except for the rest of the world. There are always people around us who, in fact, know us better in certain ways, better than we know ourselves, have a different perspective on ourselves. And so I always try to kind of lead in difficult situations, difficult decisions with two hands. The hand that says, what do I feel in my gut? And the hand that says, what are the people I trust? What do they say? What are they thinking? What are they seeing? What can I learn from them? Because they know things I don't.
It's so true. So true. We all have our own blind spots, and it's great to be able to hold a mirror up to them and see them and have something that you can't really do that yourself. I think the other metaphor here around that was you're inside of the bottle, so you can't really see the packaging label on the outside. So it's good to have someone else's perspective on that. So, okay, what do I feel in my gut? And what do the people I trust think about this situation? You've been an absolute legend. I really appreciated everything you shared here. There's so much wisdom. I can't wait to go back and listen to all of this. And again, go and check out How to Write Good, and go and check out The Vagrant on Amazon. So, John, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kev. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.